Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this NAIDOC Week webinar about Aboriginal blanket returns. I want to do an acknowledgement of country. In the spirit of reconciliation, New South Wales State Archives acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respect to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. We also wanted to talk about the material that we'll be looking at today. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people are respectfully advised that this material contains a range of material that may be culturally sensitive, including records of people who have passed away, and also that material in this webinar may contain opinions and terms that reflect those of the period in which the item was written or recorded and may not be considered appropriate today. These views do not reflect the position of New South Wales State Archives. While the information may not reflect current understanding, it's provided in a historical context. So we're going to talk about the returns of Aboriginal people. These are often lists of Aboriginal people who received blankets from the colonial authorities in the 19th century. So we talk about Aboriginal blanket returns. But there are also returns which were created almost more as a census of Aboriginal people. Local colonial authorities, such as the magistrates and police, were required at times to report on the conditions of Aboriginal people in their area. They will either comprise a statistical return, and usually when we say that we mean there's no names, just numbers, but it still gives you an idea of what's happening in that area, or lists with the names and other details of individuals. Regardless of why or when the returns were started, they are and always have been an incredibly valuable source for people tracing family and personal history. Blanket distribution may have started as early as 1841 with Governor Macquarie as part of the feasts organised at Parramatta, or there's also a letter from the Colonial Secretary to the Courts of Petty Session Magistrates in 1827 requesting details of Aboriginal people for the 1828 census of New South Wales. The blanket distribution was managed through local colonial authorities, and it also appears through landowners across the colony. Initially, it was concentrated on the 19 counties, so that area from Taree in the north to Maria in the south and west to Wellington. So there's a lot of the things that we'll be looking at today from that basic area. You'll find them through a lot of government agencies. Colonial Secretary's Office had overall responsibility for official relations with Aboriginal people until the 1880s, so a lot of material there. And also the Colonial Secretary's Office was responsible for so much of what happened in the colonies. Courts of Petty Sessions and police stations, they're the most common local authorities who are spread throughout the whole colony. There's also some among the Lands Department archives. Again, they're across a lot of the colony. One of our ongoing projects is the digitisation of the blanket returns and the associated papers. And we want to talk particularly today about these three bundles that we have done. The blanket returns are broadly arranged by locality, generally include both an Indigenous name and an English name for each adult person, as well as their age. And we have digital copies of these three Colonial Secretaries bundles available on our website now. And we're really going to focus on those and then how to find them for the rest of the webinar. So we're talking about a bundle from 1832 and then two bundles that cover between them roughly 1833 through to 1843, but patchily across the colony. So the first bundle is called Blankets for Aborigines. Now this is the title on the archive. It's basically about administration. It's about how the blankets were transported around the colony, where the blankets and to who they were sent in the colony, the number of blankets sent, and why people wanted to have blankets to distribute. It was seen as being something that was advantageous for the local area. So this is a copy of a letter from 1832 from Bishop Broughton to the Colonial Secretary. So I've just copied it in two parts so that I could make it hopefully large enough for you to read as well. Bishop Broughton had been visiting the Shoalhaven area, including Stuart Ryrie's property in the county of Argyll on the Shoalhaven River. Bishop Broughton met, and this is a quote from the letter, a numerous tribe of natives, and the chief told me that they'd never received blankets or slop clothing. Now, slop clothes were government issue clothing. They're often coarse or loose or ill-fitting. So fairly cheap is what you should take away from that. Bishop Broughton says, again a quote, "As these people are on many occasions very useful and are exposed to so much inclemency of weather," he asked that an issue of blankets and slops be made before the winter becomes more severe. That's the last page of the letter. The response, and that's the response on the left-hand side, it's written, and this is really common in the colonial secretary's correspondence, on a corner of a letter, and it says that if a tribe has been missed, they should receive blankets and slops. The writer of the response refers to the list added in pencil on the first page. So you can see that here and just under there, but I've copied it in so that it is readable. And it basically runs through where they've been distributing blankets at this time. So Goulburn Plains had received 35 blankets, Inverary 25, Sutton Forest 40, Major Errington's property in St Vincent 25, Mr Morris at St Vincent 50, and Mr Thompson at Bateman's Bay 25. So that gives you a feel for how some of the blanket distribution came about, but also the quantities that we're talking about. The next bundle we're going to talk about is papers dealing with the issue of blankets and including returns to the native population in the various districts. And again, this is the title on the archive. I'm going to apologise at this point for any mispronunciation of Aboriginal words as we're going through this. So the returns cover peoples from all of these areas, through the Darwal and the Durrig, right through to the Warramai and the Yuin. So it's quite a large area across New South Wales. This is a very small return of the Gadigal people. So there's really just 2 people listed in Botany Bay, 2 in Sydney and 3 in Broken Bay. The beginning of the bundle that we're looking at now has a number of handwritten forms in exactly this format and a note saying if we're going to keep using this, let's have it printed. So this is the kind of information that you'll find depending on how well it's been filled out, and you can see this one's not particularly well filled out, on all of the forms for the blanket returns. So an English name, a native name, probable age, number of wives, the children, and they're just given male and female, just a number, designation of tribe and the place or district of usual resort. So this is a much more detailed return. It's a return of the Wiradjuri people in 1833 of what is known as Casillas. So the small page up here on the left, that's the whole page of the return, just to give you a feel for the size of it and the way it looks. And then down here is a blow up so we can actually have a look at it in more detail. So you can see that Pidjuindi, who's known as Dicky, is 28 and he has a wife and he's from the Nandari tribe and the place or district of usual resort is Casillas. And then it just continues through listing the information. So Windilly, who's 25, is known as Tallboy, also has a wife and is from the same area. So it's really quite an incredible amount of information. Now, obviously, we know that the native name, the spelling is probably not correct, and it's how it's rendered by the person doing the census and how they know the person, but still fantastic information. The last page, and it's a 2-page return, is basically a summary of that. So there's 50 men, 39 women, 22 male children and 9 female children in that grouping. And the return was filled out by Alex, I think it's Bushby, who's a JP at Casillas. This is a return of Aboriginal natives taken at the Port Stephens on the 5th of June 1834 and to whom blankets have been distributed. So a return of the Warramai people in what's known as Port Stephens, who had received blankets. And again, same format. This is handwritten again, so that we're looking at Kanuba, who's known as Lame Walker. Not an attractive name, but perhaps give you some information about that person. He's 30 with a wife and 2 male children, and he's from the Corobeen tribe in the Port Stephens district. And you can see that within the understanding of the person taking this return, that there are 2 tribes at least listed, and across a fairly broad range, so Port Stephens to Burrell to Stroud to Telagara, quite a large range. Covendale, who's 50, is perhaps not unsurprisingly known as Old Bungarek, because that is quite an age for anyone probably on the land at that time. The next bundle is distribution of blankets covering 1838 to 1843, much the same peoples that it covered. There are some additional ones and some that it doesn't. So this is a return of the Worimi people, again in 1837 this time, but in what is known as Dungog. It includes both people who've received blankets and those that haven't received blankets. This return also covers a broad area where people lived, and be interesting to know it could be reflecting the movement of people in terms of what's fruiting or what's flowering, and moving the whole, using the whole, or hopefully still using the whole of that district. So Palima, known as Paddy Maloney, is 40 with a wife and 1 female child from the Wangan tribe, and it's shown as using the Upper Williams River, Thalalba and Dungog and etc. area. So to me that suggests they're reflecting the movement of these people. Tanimbar, who's known as Old Bungary, who's 40. It's recorded that his wife is dead, 2 male children and 2 female children. If you looked at the rest of this return, that's something that whoever took this list has done. And it would be interesting to compare it if there's one for this area at other times. Making it quite clear that it's a census of not just people who are getting blankets, so males who've received blankets, 54, males who have not received blankets, 32. Male children of those who have received blankets, 14. Females who've received blankets or a share of, and females who have not received blankets. And then female children of those who've received blankets, and then totals. This is a return of the Ngunnawal people in 1841 at what is known as Queanbeyan. The return covers people who had received blankets from the Queanbeyan Police Office. You can see the first entry here for Jenny Gobar reflects, I think, that very European thing of wanting to make someone a king. So English name's King Jamie. And I think it says it's given a plate for the Currawang. And that's the tribe that's there. The place of usual residence is Monero. Monero was spelled by nearly every other spelling than the spelling that we use today. And then going through that same sort of list, there's quite a lot of young men in this group. Taniba, who's known as Abel, he's 20. And in some cases, quite a lot of similarity between the name that they're known by the colonists and what is their name. The second page of this return of the Ngunnawal people lists women. The women are recorded linked to their men in many ways, exactly the same as the colonist women would have been known as Mrs. Smith. So down here, Laddie is just recorded as being Abel's mother. She's 70. Jenny is recorded as being King Jamie's mother. She's 65. And most of the other women are being recorded just only with a European name and as being associated with their man. This is the return of the Yuin people in 1841 at what is known as Twofold Bay, and again covering quite a broad area. Following the same format, so that in Ugania, 72, and has one female child from the Pambula tribe at Twofold Bay. And Calamoine, who's 37, with a wife and one male child. It's known as, looks like Jackandari. So a lot of information where there are returns over multiple years, an even better opportunity to go through and to follow up the sort of time that the changes that take place over time. I think that also when I look at these, important to reflect on the way both groups, both the person taking the return and the Aboriginal people that are either coming for blankets or willing to be part of a census, how much information do they want to give? Who wants to turn up? There may be other things happening in their life. So you would never expect that these returns would be all of the Aboriginal people on their country, and that there are multiple reasons for why they may not be present. So I wanted to talk about how to find these blanket returns and more broadly the other returns. So this is our website, records.nsw.gov.au. The really important thing about using our website is to scroll down. So I've put in some down arrows. Often when you go to our website, what you'll see is this wonderful picture of the bridge, but below the bridge is the search box. So the blue arrow is where collection search, great for accessing lots of things, but in this case, probably a better way to get in is to come down to these range of topics, one of which is for Aboriginal people, and to click on there. That takes you to a page where we list, in this case, all of our indexes, guides and stories specifically about the archives that we hold and how they relate to Aboriginal people. Where this arrow is our brand new page about the 19th century Aboriginal population records. We've realised while working on them, they really are more than just blanket returns. There's a whole range of reasons why these returns have been taken. So if you click on that link, actually I'll just go back, click on that link, and it takes you to this guide, which has information about the records. Remember, again, scroll down, so there's a lot more information about that. It's the kind of information we've been talking about today in this webinar. So scrolling down, take you to information about, so they're the 3 special bundles that we've looked at today. We'll also give you a lot of related information. So there's this link, Records of 19th Century Blanket Lists and Returns of Aboriginal People, will take you to this other brand new page, which is basically a list arranged by Indigenous country. So again, you can see the beginning of the list here, and it just continues down through all of those areas and provides you with the information that is available. So in most cases, if you see an entry like this that says 6 blankets dispatched, it's really just literally going to give you that information, less likely to have information about individual people. But it gives you an idea of possibly how many people were in contact and receiving blankets. So continuing to scroll down this list, Where you see a link like this one, these are the returns that we've talked about today, and that link will take you to the digitised returns. So I thought it'd be useful to see how you can find them. And of course, on the real website, all of these links, whether it's people or whether it's the European names of places, will take you to those entries. So great for scrolling down, but also you could do a find on page if you're looking for a particular place. If you click on that link, it will take you to this sort of page within our catalogue collection search. It tells you where you are and it tells you that there's a copy available. Some of them are quite big bundles, so they, a couple of 100 pages, so you might need to do a bit of scrolling to go through. But in the same way that we've just been looking at the returns, you'll be able to find the return that hopefully is of interest and use to you. Thanks for being part of this webinar.